Hello, White Sox fans, and welcome to another edition of the FutureSox podcast. My name is Ian Eskridge. Joining me this evening is James Fox. And as it is draft season, we have a guest to go through here and talk mock drafts and college information, prep information, everything. Mr. Joe Doyle, how are you, Joe?
Boys, it is good to be back. I don't know how many years in a row I've been on this show, but I enjoy it every time.
Appreciate you coming on. So what do you work? You're over at Future Star Series. What are you working on right now?
What am I not working on is the better question, Ian. Let's see. So we've got the top 615 prospects for the draft coming out right before the draft. Got mock draft 6.0, which is going to be the final iteration. So it'll be my best guesses. The thing about those mock drafts is we're like, as an industry, and I'm sure Jim and Jonathan, Carlos, everybody would admit this. We're used as pawns. We're manipulated. We do the best that we can, but you kind of got to, dig through the crap. So, but and in any case, the last mock draft will come out soon, and then, yeah, dude, then I'm looking forward to turning the page to 2025 because these drafts, they're 15 months of hard work, and being able to talk about literally any new names is a blessing from the gods.
Probably gets pretty tedious after a while. So what do you
Yeah.
guys do on draft night? You just you combing for information, or you have a live show? What do you got going on?
Yeah, so this will be year 3 that I'm at the draft, physically at the draft. And really, I'm just covering it from live from the event. Like, I'm texting anybody and everybody in the industry, trying to get scoops, guys, when they're getting drafted, get it 10 minutes before it happens if I can. And then really, it's just pushing out content after that. Best guys available, most impressive classes, schools that look like they are really going to have a nice class because their guys aren't getting bought from pro teams. So yeah, it's just I'll be in Texas and doing a number of different things.
It's awesome. So me and Ian have talked about this draft a ton. I'm sure you have too. Just the four major demographics that everybody kind of talks about in these drafts. How would you rank them for this one?
Well, I think college hitters is certainly the top demographic. I mean, it's a reasonably solid, deep college hitter class. I from a this draft as a whole, like I don't know if there's going to be a lot of like 5-win players. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of stars in this class personally. Certainly no, I don't see any superstars, but I do think you're going to get a bunch of 4 to 4.5 win, solid impact, middle of the order bats that maybe aren't 5-tool guys, but provide some value in the batter's box. So college hitters is certainly number one for me. I do think it's a sneaky year for high school arms. Not a lot of people are talking about that. The top is okay. Like Caminiti is pretty good. Cash Mayfield, pretty good. And then you have just a myriad of righties that offer big stuff, good bodies, projection. Maybe they lack a third pitcher. They don't throw great strikes, but Ryan Sloan, Levi Sterling, William Schmidt, Joey Oki, Dax Whitney. Like there's a lot of high school pitchers in this class that I think in time could end up being pretty solid middle of the rotation starters. There's a lot of special fastballs on the high school side of things. There's just not a lot of full menu types. So that would be second. And then beyond that, it's probably a toss up between college pitchers and high school hitters. I would probably give the edge to college pitching just because there's more depth on that side in the second and third round. And then, this is a pretty tough class for high school hitters. There's a lot of high school middle infielders that you're going to hear taken in the 20 to 45 range, but all of those guys are going to be 4-year projects, and most of them have some sort of wart that's going to stop them from being, a Colson Montgomery or a Colt Emerson or something in that bucket.
So something I've been asking guests, like obviously, because I kind of figured what you were going to say about the prep pitching class. Lots of teams just like don't want to delve into the high school pitching class. Do you think that changes this year because of just, it's a good group? You think anybody that wouldn't typically might this year because of that?
Honestly, I think the high school pitching crop is going to go off the board the exact same way that it goes off the board seemingly in every single draft. You probably won't see very many of them taken between 1 and 30, and then 31 hits, and it'll be, 31 through 36. Comp A is going to be all high school hitters and all high school shortstops, or all high school pitchers and all high school shortstops. And then the beginning of the second round, those teams that have money, those, the Royals, the Guardians, they're probably going to dip into that pool again. You'll see it go again in Comp B. But to answer the question that I think you're asking, which is in that 15 to 30 range, do I think that teams are just going to take a little bit more chances? I don't see it. I think there's enough college floor in this class that we still won't see the high school pitchers go off the board until the conventional spots that we do.
With the overall prep class, how do you feel about the overall prep class? I mean, is it? I mean, we're talking second round and probably smush kind of in the middle because the later guys in high school generally don't sign anyway. They end up going to college, especially with the way college baseball is going right now with the NIL stuff and everything. Is there anybody that you really think that's really pushed through this year? I mean, because Connor Griffin was kind of the guy who was looked at as like being one of the top guys at the beginning of the season. So has anybody like really done something this year that has pushed them, I don't know, back half of the first round, comp picks, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the high school shortstops that have gained weight have done well for themselves. Wyatt Sanford at Independence in Frisco, Texas. He's an A&M recruit. He's done really well for himself. He's put on 10 to 15 pounds. He's already 6'2". He's regarded as maybe the best defensive shortstop in this class. He's shown a little bit of power. It could be average raw power at the next level. I think he's done really well. He was more of a middle of the second round type of guy, and now I think you could hear him in the back of the first. And then there's some of the other guys that you've routinely heard, like Kellen Lindsay came out of nowhere, and he's just, he's a blazing shortstop, could end up in center field. I don't know if he's going to hit enough. I don't know if there's going to be very much power, but there's a lot of teams. There's at least enough teams fearful that they're going to miss on the next Trey Turner that he could go in the 25 to 30 range. And then, I'll tell you the guy that nobody's really talking about, and I'm pretty sure I have him higher on my board than anybody. And maybe I might regret that at some point, but Griffin Burkholder, an outfielder from Virginia, he's a West Virginia commit, 6'3", 198 pounds. He was an absolute tool shed last spring and last summer. And, it's plus to double plus run times. It's plus to double plus exit velos. There's hitability. He suffered a brutal hamstring injury that kept him out for much of the spring, but he finally started to get his legs from under him again in the late spring. And I think he helped out his stock a little bit. He is something of the right-handed version, not quite as big. He's something of the right-handed version of Johnny Farmello. I don't know if he's going to end up being that caliber of prospect, but the tools are all there, and he showed some hitability this spring. So that's a guy that I think maybe a team just kind of takes a shot on in the 28 to 42 range. I think he could surprise some people on draft day.
So I think, people have talked about this being a bad draft, but there's players up at the top and there's players to find. How many top 100 guys right away do you think, like from this top group?
Yeah, I podcasted about that about a week ago. I was trying to figure that out myself. The number that I landed on was 9, which is about average, to be honest with you. I think last year we ended up with 12 to 13, but Bazana, Condon, Caglione, Burns, Weatherholt, Montgomery, Hagen Smith, Connor Griffin. I think those are the locks to be top 100 guys. That would be 8 different players I just listed. And then, you can probably insert one of Nick Kurtz or Bryce Rayner into that mix as well. The Tibbs, the Savage, the Caminiti's, those guys, I don't foresee them jumping onto a top 100 list. And so I gave you 9. I think the guy that could sneak into the 6, 7, 8, 9 range that, he's a little bit of a Tommy Troy type of a player is Christian Moore. Maybe he ends up in the 90 to 100 range for some folks, but I feel pretty confident about 9 being the number that we're going to land on in August 1st.
Yeah, Triple Crown SEC winner. Guy can hit, for sure.
He can hit.
Yeah, if his glove was a little bit better, I think that he likely shoots up, higher.
Yeah.
But
to that same point, like Tommy Troy and Matt Shaw, to a lesser extent Matt Shaw, they had the exact same narratives. Like they can really hit. There's a lot of power. They're not great defenders. Matt Shaw has kind of turned things around with the glove. He's looking like a better second baseman, and Tommy Troy has had a slow year with the bat, but He fits somewhere in that demographic, and you could probably flip a coin as to where those guys would rank 1, 2, 3.
So I would assume that Christian Moore would be one of those guys. Speaking of the college class, when you're talking about changing perceptions of how you were viewed preseason to now that draft season's coming up, what college guys do you think have really popped to bring their stock up a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy that stands out immediately is Ryan Waldschmidt, the outfielder at Kentucky. He was listen. I this is not a feather in my cap. I had him at 25 in the class going to the Cape in 2023. He blew out his knee on the Cape, and I said that sucks. He's probably going to be an end of the second, early third. Well, that guy rehabbed his ass off. Made his debut in March, which was amazing with the injury that he suffered. And he didn't miss a beat. I mean, the plus run times were back in left field for Kentucky this year. Made a ton of contact. It's elite swing decisions. There's power there. I think, he went from a guy that was a late first comp A down to like a late second, third round type guy, all the way back up to a guy that probably gets taken in the 15 to 20 range now. So Ryan Waldschmidt really stands out for me. And the other guy that I would point out, and I know it's not the sexiest name because he's been a dude forever, is Trey Savage. I don't know what Trey Savage could have done better in 2024. I mean, it's 3 pitches. They're all above average. I think 2 of them are plus. It's a 6'4" frame, 230-pound workhorse body, tons of strikes. I mean, it's not too dissimilar from the menu and the recipes that Gavin Williams put up at East Carolina when he was, what did he get taken, like 9 or 11 in 2021. So yeah, I think Trey Savage is a guy that's probably gone from the end of the first to now being 15 being the floor.
Yeah, just not get hurt. That's the only thing he could have done better, and can't control that, So
yeah, and even that was like the dry needling thing. I mean, I guess to a certain extent you can control it because it was voluntary acupuncture, but no, I mean, his arm held up well. Yeah, I think someone's gonna make do very well with drafting Trey Savage.
So the Waldschmidt thing's funny, and I don't know when you first like put him in a mock like up high, but I remember Keith Law did it like pretty early, like maybe like 21 or something, and then he wasn't even in the pipeline like 150 yet at that time. It like wasn't updated, so it was like this is it really looked like if you weren't paying attention that Keith Law just like made up a guy, but he's gonna go like in the top 20 or 25 now. So
yeah, no, Keith. Listen, Keith knows what he's talking about. Keith is tuned in, and Keith pays attention. He goes out and sees guys. The one thing about Pipeline, and they do tremendous work, is there's a huge gap from when they update the 100 to the 200 or the 100 to the 150. There's like 4 or 5 months that go by. But yeah, I mean, Waldschmidt, he's a really good player. He's a really safe player. There's some tools in the run game. And if you buy the swing, it's a little bit of a weird swing, but if you buy the swing, a model team like the Brewers or the Orioles, I don't think he's going to last long.
Is like Mike Sirota like one of the guys like on the negative side, maybe? Just that, I mean, I know he was mocked high early. It doesn't mean he was ever going there, but he was a top 10 type guy.
He has to be. He got off to a slow start for the second time in 2 years. And, when Mike Sirota is not playing well, scouts question his attitude. I mean, he's got poor body language when things aren't going his way. And I just think, he's the type of guy that someone drafts in the second round and is really happy. He needs to be with he needs a sports psychologist. He needs someone that can keep his head in the game from the get-go. I've talked to Mike a couple of times on my draft show, and I think the guy really struggles with expectations and meeting expectations and putting pressure on himself. And I think if you get him in the right environment where he can really thrive and not be the guy, because he's been the guy at Northeastern for a while, I think if you get him in a place where he can be a little bit more hidden, he might find a lot more success. The one thing, people crush Mike Sirota for falling down boards and things like that. He's 6'4", 195 pounds. He can run, he can throw, there's power, there's feel to hit. Like, I genuinely think he might be AJ Pollock, and someone's probably going to do very, very well with making him their second pick.
Yeah, sounds like an Oriole.
He does sound like an Oriole.
It's not a White Sox player, that's for sure.
It's not a Sox.
Not the bad body language. No, sir.
No.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
No
Expectations? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, the big questions, obviously, the Guardians. You tell me what the Guardians are doing. I have a pretty good idea of the next few, I feel like, at this point. But just like, what are your thoughts on their options? And then something we've been asking people, like, when do you think they actually decide? Like sometime that day?
So the Guardians operate a little bit differently than, the Orioles and some of these other teams that have had the first overall pick. I think they're probably going to have a much better idea what they're going to do in the days leading up. I genuinely do think the Guardians are weighing all their options and trying to get the best deal. They're a team that historically has gone under slot more than anybody in the history of the MLB draft, at least in the bonus era. So I would expect them to go under slot. Now, it's probably a foregone conclusion that that's going to happen anyway, that they're the number one pick. But when you consider, Travis Bazzana for $10 million or JJ Weatherholt for $9 million or Chase Burns for $9.5 million, like, I think there's a number of different ways they can go, and it might all be dictated by, who they have planned for their second and third pick, which both come before like pick 50 or something like that. So I think my gut tells me that it's going to be one of JJ Weatherholt or Chase Burns, and my intel at this point seems to think it's going to be Chase Burns as they look for pitching, but I know everyone else is hearing JJ Weatherholt. So the truth of the matter is nobody really knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. So can you maybe explain just the process just of cutting a deal, right? Because I kind of think if you're Travis Bazzana and you don't want to take too much of a haircut, right? But I kind of think you're going to Oakland at 4 then. And maybe he wants to do that, right? But if you're unwilling to take $9 million from Cleveland to go 1, but then you're going to have to take the slot amount at 4, it seems like a no-brainer to me to just take the deal and go 1. But we've kind of talked about this. Some players and advisors just don't want to do that. Why?
Yeah, I think that last part is the critical part, James. A lot of times the players have absolutely nothing to do with the negotiations, and it screws them. It screws them over and over and over. A lot of times it is the agent or the advisor saying, I'm not going to have my client go under slot because if 3 years from now we get to a point where my client feels undervalued, maybe it's an arbitration or pre-arb or something, they can look back at my performance in the draft and say, my advisor forced me to take a $1 million haircut. So from an advisor perspective, there's two sides of the coin. It's like, okay, I can get Travis Bazzana 9.7 or 9.8 to go number 1 overall. And he looks back and he says, boy, I had to cut $900,000 off my take home just to go number 1. I feel like I got the short end of the stick there. Or you can have him go at slot for 9.2, get his full bonus at pick number 4. And it looks better for the agent in the long term if a player's not totally with it with the business side of things. So the thing that most people don't understand in this whole thing is a large majority of the players have absolutely no say. They stay out of it. They just trust the advisor to make those decisions. And I've found that the players that are more engaged, that are more in the camp of, hey, this is where I want to play. I'd love to go play here. I'm not worried about the signing bonus. They're generally the ones that find more success at the next level. So yeah, there are certain agencies that won't cut deals. And if they do, they're very, very small haircuts. And there are others that are a little bit more receptive to the idea of the label of being a number 1 pick and the haircut that comes along with it. So yeah, Travis Bazzana, as an example, is represented by Excel. And Excel had Chase Davis last year, and Chase Davis fell to pick number 21, and the Cardinals gave him full slot, but I know he could have gone some spots earlier than that for a discount. So that's just the way that the industry works. There's a psychological side to things, and I do wish players were a little bit more engaged and invested in where they end up playing at the next level.
Well, so Condon right now seems like a guy that wants the slot, right? So, which is why he's not going to go. And even if Cleveland was interested, he would want Cleveland's slot value, which nobody's getting. But if he
Nobody.
went 4, he'd probably just sign for the slot value at 4, right? Like he's just gonna take slot like wherever he gets taken.
Yeah, and like, listen, there's enough like big time college players in this class where you lose leverage as you fall to 3 or 4 or 5. There's still Braden Montgomery, there's still Jack Caglione, there's still Bryce Rayner, there's still Connor Griffin. Like, agents and teams can still leverage players off of one another until you get to about pick number 8 or 9. So Condon is an interesting one. He's represented by Vayner, and Vayner has Chase Burns as well. But Vayner has done deals in the past. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they did the Carlos Correa deal way back when. I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me on it. But it's interesting. Last year we saw Boris Corp manipulate, Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz go 1 and 2 and maximize the amount of money that they could make by doing, basically 2 haircuts there. I do kind of wonder whether or not they're trying to play that card. Vayner's trying to play that card with Chase Burns and Charlie Condon at 1 and 2. I think it would make a lot of sense to maximize both of those guys' take home. And I do remember hearing some things about Chase Burns when he transferred to Wake Forest. He had more NIL money on the table that he walked away from different schools. But in talking to folks close to that situation, it was one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to worry about NIL right now. I'm going to go to Wake Forest, become the best version of myself that I can, and position myself to be a top 5 pick. And that's exactly what he did. So it could be one of those things where Burns is like, hey, I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, and now I'm okay with taking 9.5 instead of 10.5 to go number 1 overall. There's some ego with that guy, and it'll be interesting to see if that plays into things.
Ian, I think that's interesting just because I feel like a lot of the latest, like there's mock drafts that Burns might not go till 6 or 7 if Colorado doesn't take him. So I could totally see him making some sort of deal at 1. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That'd be crazy. So nobody beats Skeen's bonus record?
I think there are agencies that will not, like, so we talk about where do you draw the line, right? Where do you hold the line? I think there are certain agencies that are willing to do a haircut at 1, but they are not willing to they are not going to let their client take less than what Paul Skeens got. I'm trying to remember what that was. I think it was 9.2.
Yeah, it was 9.2 or 9.3.
Yeah, I just don't think there's any scenario where Paul Skeens' deal doesn't get beaten by somebody. Bonus pools are up so much this year. I mean, $10.5 million is a huge number. And then it's 10, and then it's like 9.5 or something like that. I just have a hard time seeing nobody getting slot or close to it or above 9.2 in the first 4 picks. Someone will beat it.
All right. So what is the craziest rumor you've heard that you can share?
I mean, I went out on a limb and mock draft 4.0. I had James Tibbs going number 1 overall, and Tibbs. I think the interesting thing is Tibbs didn't go to the combine, so he didn't take the medicals at the combine. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that Cleveland could have him be the pick for 8 or 7.8 million, because it's right on that $75 million threshold. I don't think that's going to happen. That was a rumor that I had heard that he was, being considered. I've also heard Nick Kurtz back in March as being like the guy. And obviously a lot has changed with Kurtz, but I would say James Tibbs going number 1 overall in this class would definitely be the craziest thing. The reason I don't think that's going to happen is I don't see enough high impact high school talent for Cleveland to save all that money for in Comp A and early 2 and 3. It's not the 2023 draft, it's the 2024 draft, and there's not a lot of special high schoolers to try and parlay a massive deal at 1 for, in my opinion.
Well, and they can sign a guy for $9 million and they still have $10 million to spend. Their pool is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, you can sign a guy. You could do JJ Weatherholt for $9 million, and your next pick you would have like $4.6 million to spend in Comp A. That would be the bonus. Your black, whatever you want to call it. That's where you come out black. Cleveland has a ton of money. I mean, they can be creative all the way down to the 4th or 5th round. I don't think it really matters who they take with the first pick, so long as they save like 700 grand, which I think they will.
So White Sox, I feel like it's coming into focus a little bit. Just like your thoughts on their plans at 5. We've heard a lot about Connor Griffin, but look, I mean, the right college bat there. Like I feel like they probably just pounce and do that. I would imagine.
Yeah, I think you're right. The Connor Griffin rumors are real. I think that there's a scenario where certain college bats are off the board, and so it makes Chicago's decision easy to take Connor at 5. I haven't heard them directly connected to Jack Caglione. I know a lot of people have. I think it's one of those things like if JJ Weatherhold's there at 5, I have a hard time seeing Chicago walk away from that. If Travis Bazzana's there at 5, and these are very real possibilities. I mean, if Travis Bazzana gets to 4, what's stopping him from getting to 5? A deal, like it could happen. I think if Bazzana, Condon, Burns, or Weatherholt, those would be the 4 that I would pick. If any one of them is there at 5, I think they're going to be the pick. I haven't heard Caglione as much, but he wouldn't totally surprise me. If one of those 4 is not there, I would guess Connor Griffin is probably the guy.
Yeah, so Caglione visited this week. He's visited a bunch of places. It doesn't mean a ton. So there's a lot of smoke about him here. I just think they feel like he's going to be gone. Other people that do what you do seem to think he's going early. And there's just teams that don't care about whatever issues, the first base thing and whatever, that they'll just take him and whatever. How much could it help the White Sox, like, having Oakland in front of them? Like, if somebody falls, like if Condon or Bazzana falls and the White Sox are like, look, we got $8 million for you. Like, I doubt Oakland does that, right? So, I mean,
Yeah, I would be quite stunned if Oakland, in the situation that they're currently in, goes over slot for anybody, or even, I bet Oakland would prefer not to go slot for someone. I don't know if it's going to help Chicago. I think Oakland is just going to take the player that best fits their organization. I've only heard Braden Montgomery, Nick Kurtz, and Travis Bazzana with Oakland. Maybe it's one of those things where they're not planning on JJ Weatherholt being there or Charlie Condon being there, but those are the 3 names that I continue to hear more and more with Oakland. And if we just play the numbers game, you guys, like, chances are one of Burns, Weatherholt, Bazzana, or Condon is going to be on the board at 5, and that should make it pretty easy. And then it becomes, where does Connor Griffin go? Because I don't know if he has a spot. I don't know if he has a home until Pittsburgh at 9.
That's why I think there is a scenario where he just, it makes sense for the White Sox if they can save money at 5. If there are a couple college guys are gone, you just take Connor Griffin there. So speaking of that, like, it's the first year in a while the White Sox have a comp pick. They have the Mariners pick, obviously. Like, how much should that factor in at 5? And then anything you can share just on 43, 68, 78 for them. I've heard some prep arms. They love Midwest guys, obviously. So,
yeah, I mean, Ryan Sloan they were in a lot to see Ryan Sloan. I don't know. And maybe that's just because it's a proximity bias. It's easy for them to get there to see him. I don't think Ryan Sloan is going to be there with their next pick. And in terms of what they do at 5, if Connor Griffin and his camp have been flexible with bonus dollars. It's been surprising to me how outwardly willing they are to make a deal, to negotiate with where they end up. It wouldn't surprise me if Chicago can save 200 grand by taking Connor Griffin at pick number 5. In terms of what they do later in the class, I would be pretty surprised if they didn't end up with 1 or 2 high school pitchers. Like you mentioned, they've been in on a lot of the high school pitchers late in the spring. They've been spotted out, seeing them quite a bit. So I don't exactly know where they're going to take them, but that would be something that I would keep an eye on. There's a kid in your area, I think he's Illinois. I think his name is Tomas Valencius, who's a big lefty that I think is a guy that they could be interested in. So maybe look out for that name. His brother Vitus was a massive human being, a first baseman that ended up at South Carolina. Tomas is a lefty up to 96 that similar build, but a lot of people really think he's got a pretty special fastball and a good changeup.
Yeah, I've heard Joey Oki a bit. I mean, he was on their area code team. We've heard the Boston, Bateman. There's a whole list of guys. So,
Yeah.
if they did prep arms at 43 and 68, I wouldn't be surprised. But look, I feel like it's going to be tough to go slot at 5 and do that. That's where I think they probably need to cut at some point. So,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Most of the money in this draft is really highlighted in Arizona, Cleveland, Kansas City, and who am I missing? Arizona. Did I say Arizona? Those are the 4 teams that have the most money, that have the most maneuverability. Maybe Pittsburgh as well. Outside of those teams, there's not a ton of flexibility in this class. So I would expect there to be some deals cut, especially 15 to 30. Like there's probably going to be some teams that are really going to try to use the genericness of that lumping of players against some agents and trying to cut deals.
What's the top 5 if you had to guess right now? A couple days, week and a half before the draft.
Yeah, so my last mock, I had Chase Burns 1, Charlie Condon 2. There's that Vayner combo. I have Caglione 3, but that would immediately go to Chase Burns if he was available. Travis Mazzana 4, and that would leave JJ Weatherholt to Chicago. And I don't have any insider intel in how they feel about the undersized infielder. They've done the undersized infielder thing in the past. We all remember. Obviously, the White Sox and JJ Weatherholt has a left-handed swing. He's a way better athlete, and there's a ton of power as opposed to Nick Madrigal. But I don't know how they feel about JJ. JJ has been such a rocket ship over the last month that I would think he's a serious consideration at 5. But yeah, for me, the White Sox, it would be JJ or it would be Connor Griffin right now.
So
which means it's definitely going to be Hagen Smith, by the way.
So that's the one thing I've heard pretty consistently is that they want to take a bat. I don't know. Who knows? Like I've been surprised before, but I haven't heard from anybody that they want to take a pitcher there. Because I think they want to take a bunch like later and on day 2. But
the White Sox, critical of them as everyone may be, have done really, really well with pitchers in the 2nd and the 3rd and the 4th, and just taking some shots on injured guys. Like they've proven that they can find value in later rounds, and they don't need to reach for it at the top. So if that's the case, and there's some pretty talented bats on the board at 5, go get what you don't have. So I think they'll do that.
We've been talking about going and looking and seeing who had TJ earlier this year to see who they can pick in the 2nd round. That's our thought process.
I mean, maybe Luke Sennard is going to be a White Sox.
I mean, fits the qualifications. Last year the White Sox kind of pulled a big thing for White Sox fans, at least, and signed George Wolkow. Where he was ranked last year with what he's doing right now, where do you think he would have gone in this year's draft?
Yeah, so Wolkow was fascinating. I mean, truly like one of the most fascinating prospects in the 23 draft, because everyone was out to see him in the summer and the fall leading up to his new quote unquote senior year, his reclass senior year. And he was, and I mean this respectfully, he was big, he was slow, he was at that point unathletic. He was kind of gangly and disconnected. Like he hadn't grown into being an adult professional mature ball player. And yeah, I mean, it was crazy. And then you hear all these things about Chicago and things, they started so much later than everyone else. And so you get through February, you get through March, you haven't heard much on him. And then April comes around and it's like, has anyone heard about George Wolkow? Like he's cut, like he's big, he's physical, he's hitting for power, he's connected at the plate. So it was almost one of those things where George Wolkow went from there's no way anyone's going to pay him what he's going to be looking for to we have to shove scouting directors in there as fast as we can to try and get another look at this guy. And I think there's that first impression syndrome where enough guys saw him during the summer where they kind of just crossed him off. But anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying if he was in this draft, he's probably a second-round pick. I mean, he's probably like an early second-round pick. Probably in that same boat as like Griffin Burkholder. Like it's big, it's physical, it's power. There's arm strength in the field, and in a class that's just generally lacking like impact bats on the high school side, you have to think that he would fit somewhere, like I said, comp A early two, maybe the back of the first, because yeah, I almost feel bad for the kid because if he didn't reclassify, he'd probably have a lot more money in his bank account.
Yeah, and I don't know what he was asking for ahead of time that might have scared teams off, but I mean, JJ Lally is the White Sox Midwest area scout. He gets credit for Noah Schultz too. I know that, he basically called George and was like, "Look, we got $1 million. Do you want to sign?" And the kid decided to do that instead of going to South Carolina. I don't know if somebody else would have called like a couple of rounds earlier and offered him 1.5 if he would have taken it or what. I don't know, but
I didn't get that. I mean, you and I, James, you and I talked a ton before that draft, and you asked me about George, and I was talking to people about George, and I didn't get the impression he had a ton of heat on him. I mean, I know that teams liked him, but the White Sox have done well with targeting local talent, and so this must have been just a strategy of theirs. And I give credit to George and his advisor and his camp for just taking 7 figures. So many of these guys decide to go to college and bet on themselves. The numbers are like, it's like 12% of guys end up ranked higher than they were as high schoolers on their next draft eligible board. So take $1 million at the chance that you get to do it and get yourself into Pro Bowl, because here's the other thing about it. Let's say he reclassifies and goes to South Carolina. George Wolkow is going to be in AAA probably by the time he would have been draft eligible again. So he's going to start his pre-arb years earlier than he would have otherwise. So he's going to be 2 years ahead of the curve in that respect too. So yeah, George and his advisors did it the right way. His advisor asked the right questions, and now he's positioned to have a long MLB career. And if it all clicks, he could be a free agent at 28, 29 years old and really cash in with his first contract. That can't be understated.
He's going to play basically a full season at Kannapolis, and he doesn't turn 19 until January.
Yeah, that's like super valuable.
Yeah, it's insane. One of those cautionary tales, like Peyton Stovall.
Right.
I mean,
and he's even like Peyton Stovall is even the mild version of that story.
Right.
Like, yeah, Stovall walked away from $3 million, but he's still going to get, Stovall's probably still going to get one.
He'll go in the the 50s somewhere or something, like.
I think he'll probably go at the end of the second or comp B. So he'll probably get $1 million. There are guys though that, and let's look at Andrew Dukanich, Andrew, I don't know if you know who that is, but Andrew Dukanich.
Oh, yeah. Mike Shirley loved Andrew Dukanich.
Yeah.
Because he loves Indiana guys.
That's a perfect example. Like Dukanich walked away from $3.5 million, I'd say. Goes to Vanderbilt, has a nice freshman year, comes back this year, blows out. And now it's one of those things where it's like, this isn't Grant Taylor. There's not a large enough sample. The stuff isn't the same. Does Dukanich take $400,000 in this draft to go pro? His family is immensely on the side of education. So I think he's going to go back to school and, try and put up a showcase type of thing towards the end of 2025. But that's a perfect example. Like you walked away from $3.5 million, or Eli Jerzembic is another one. You walked away from all this money, you got an arm injury, and now you're hoping to get $500,000 in your draft eligible year if you've even shown enough for a team to take a chance on you. So, yeah, I mean, if you ever get offered 7 figures for anything in your life, I don't care. Just take it. What are we doing?
Yeah, you can go back to college once your baseball career flames out with money from the club, by the way. But
so if you walk away from, let's say you walk away from $1.5 million, like let's say your agent says, hey, we can get you 3 this year, but in Peyton Stovall's case, let's get you to Arkansas. We're going to get you 4.5 after you go to school. If Peyton Stovall was in pro ball right now, 1, he'd have more money. 2, he'd be in AA. And 3, he'd be 2 years closer to his first contract, which would more than make up for the $1.5 million that he walked away from in the draft. So I don't understand the reluctance of it is mostly agents to walk away from now money. It's such an ego trip that I'll never understand.
It was a strong UCLA commit, but that's one of the Thatcher Hurd's a guy the White Sox loved. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised if they took him in this draft just because of their past history. But I mean, that's a guy too. Like, didn't turn pro out of high school, struggled at LSU. He might go in the 4th round. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just
Perfect example. And there's a laundry list of them. Like you, people look at the Dylan Cruzes and they're like, oh, Dylan Cruz, he was going to go 20 and he went number 2. Dude, like, can we take a second to recognize that Dylan Cruz is the outlier? Cody Schreier, another UCLA kid, he walked away from 2.5, 3 mil. He's going to go in the 3rd or 4th round, maybe the 5th round. Like, just take the money. And I'm not trying to get on my soapbox here, but take the freaking money.
there's trade talks going on too, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't know how serious, just because like the draft like takes over, man. Like one of the trade deadline's collateral damage to Rob Manfred's like early draft. There's just the trade deadline's the 72 hours at the end of the month. There's nothing going on right now. Now I know Trader
No.
Jerry apparently your guy wants to make deals early, it's been reported. But so, the White Sox have a whole bunch of pieces. The Mariners were one of the rumored teams that the White Sox were scouting because they're interested in multiple names. Now, Luis Roberts, obvious, but what else do you think would help the Mariners that's on the White Sox currently?
Any singular bullpen piece with a pulse, I think, would help the Seattle Mariners right now. I think Michael Kopech would be like, this is all due respect to Michael Kopech. He doesn't move the needle. Like, he's got a great arm, but he's been hit pretty damn hard and he struggles to throw strikes at times. Michael Kopech would be probably an 8th inning guy for Seattle right now, right in the same vein as Ryan Stanek. I think Seattle would have a ton of interest in that. Beyond that, and I don't mean to kind of like bury the White Sox. I don't know if there's a lot of pieces that Seattle would be interested in that like conceivably make sense. I can't see them going after Andrew Vaughn. I can't see them chasing some of the corner outfielders. So yeah, it's going to be the same names for a lot of teams that it is for Seattle. It's Michael Kopech, it's Luis Robert, and I think for the right deal, Seattle would be all over Luis Robert, as would any team.
So the right deal.
That's the tough part.
I don't know that the White Sox will make the right deal for somebody else just because of the 3.5 years of control, but they might. Like, look, if the White Sox are concerned about Luis Robert being hurt all the time, and like, who knows, right? Like, I think it's probably going to take something massive, but I think the Mariners and the Phillies, and there's a couple other teams that line up pretty well. Who do you think, just like of those Mariners top guys, they deem like the most expendable?
Well, I mean, Harry Ford has got to be the guy that immediately comes to mind for everybody, and for obvious reasons. They have Cal Raleigh for the next 3.5 years. I would venture that Cal Raleigh is going to be interested in doing an extension because he's going to hit free agency at 32. It makes sense for both parties. Seattle could pretty easily draft a college catcher in the 2nd round this year and protect themselves for the future at that position. So, and it's a position that I don't think the White Sox really have a strong feel for who the guy is going to be. Like, is it going to be Corey Lee? He's had some flashes. Is it going to be Edgar Cuero? Like, maybe he's also had some flashes, but the Angels damn near broke him. Yeah, so I think Harry Ford makes a lot of sense. I think the guy that Seattle would be interested in moving, just by the hype that's surrounding him, is Lazaro Montez. The thing is, like, yeah, Lazaro Montez is a top 50 or top 60 prospect in a lot of baseball. I don't have him there. I still have him in the 90 to 100 range. He's a monster at the plate. I don't know if Chicago is going to be in a huge rush to go after like station to station sluggers anymore because they did that for so long. But I would point to Harry Ford. I would point to Laz Montez. And then some of those tertiary guys like the Aiden Smiths, the Ty Peets. I'm sure Chicago could get those 3. I'm sure Chicago could get Harry Ford, Laz Montez, Aiden Smith, and a hard-throwing starting pitcher type for Luis Robert. I don't know if that's enough, but I think that's the sort of package that you start at.
What do you think of that, James?
Yeah, I mean, Harry Ford's highly regarded. You think Harry Ford's going to catch for sure?
I do. It's interesting that they haven't. This is year 3 of Harry Ford being in the organization. He doesn't have an inning anywhere else. They are not in any rush to showcase him as anything but a catcher. And I say this from an unbiased lens. He has genuinely gotten better and better and better with his receiving skills over the year. And he's always had an above average arm. And obviously, he has a ton of value with his legs. So, I do think he catches. And I think he's a much better prospect than Cuero or Corey Lee.
Well, I just don't know that the knock was ever. Ian, do you remember that? Like, I don't know that the knock was that he couldn't catch, but there was just a lot of talk that teams would just like turn him into a center fielder or something. It was just.
Yeah, I heard that they were
so
that they thought about
unconventional.
moving him, but if he can stick a catcher, of course everybody on the White Sox side has their their eyes on the top guys, the Emersons and that kind of guy. But I mean,
I would be surprised if Seattle entertained Luis Robert if it would require a Colt Emerson, or I don't even know if Seattle would entertain the idea of moving Cole Young, to be totally honest with you, because he's just one of those guys that I don't even think he's going to be, that crazy of a player. I think he's going to be Jeff McNeil, but he is so close to the debut, and Seattle has such a black hole on their infield right now with J.P. Crawford is on the decline, Josh Rojas is on the decline, or he's never really been a full-time caliber player. Polanco has obviously been a nightmare. I think they're really counting on Cole Young in 2025, so I think they'd be pretty reluctant to move him. But the only guys that I don't think Seattle would pick up the phone for would be Colt Emerson and to a lesser extent Felnine Celestin. I think just about everybody would be worth a conversation.
Yeah, because I think White Sox fans found Johnny Farmelo interesting. Obviously, he's hurt, but that was, what Seattle did last year, and this is a little bit off topic, but like what Seattle did last year, is that the Diamondbacks playbook this time around, you think?
Man, I don't think so. And the only reason I say that it's not is I don't think there's enough high school position players that'll interest them to spend all that money at the back of the first and in those comp rounds. I think they're going to go heavy on the high school pitchers. I think there's enough, and that's what they did back in 2019 when it was Brandon Pfaadt, I think, and it was Blake Walston, and I'm trying to remember the other one, but that's what they did when they had this sort of situation back then. They also took Corbin Carroll. I think that's the route that they're going to go again. I think it's going to be high school arm, and something else.
You think the Mariners wait until after the draft to do anything major? There was the report that said that DePoto and AJ Preller, they'd move fast if they could, but I feel like other teams aren't ready.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think Seattle has to feel a sense of urgency. I mean, listen, you just blew a 10 game division lead on the Astros, and it's down to 3, and the offense is getting worse. I mean, Seattle has a bottom 3 offense in the sport, and there's no stones they can turn over to fix this with the current players that they have, without simply praying that Julio Rodriguez comes back to form. So I think if Seattle, I don't think Jerry's the type of general manager or president of baseball operations that's ever going to overpay outside of the market to do something 2 weeks early. But I think if there was a team that was willing to make some moves now, and they fell in love with the Mariners prospect, you talk about the Cubs with Nico Horner. I know that rumor was kind of spreading. Let's say the Cubs are absolutely head over heels on Aiden Smith. I think Seattle would obviously move quickly to try and supplement this offense in that way. But they won't overpay. They won't go outside of the market.
We can give you a lightly used Paul DeJong.
I don't think that's going to move the needle.
He's got a lot of home runs, so he's very slow. Got thrown out at home tonight, and it was pretty.
He also
comical.
has a lot of strikeouts, and Seattle is going to break that record again. So probably not the guy.
Yeah, there's not really a whole lot that we can offer you other than Luis Robert or something along those lines.
Yeah, and even still, like, Luis Robert's going to continue to add to the strikeout totals, but he provides a lift in other ways.
Where do you think they would play him?
Right field.
Right. Okay.
It has to be right field. Yeah. I mean, right field is the tougher assignment in T-Mobile Park than left field is, and I just think they would value his arm out there. you're kind of wasting his arm talent in left field.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And you got that nice big outfield for Julio and Robert to patrol. That's you don't even half a left fielder with those two guys in the outfield, and you'd be fine.
Yeah, you could get away with Gavin Sheets in left field with those two guys in right center.
I mean, if you really want to add your strikeout total.
I'll throw him into the deal. That's fine.
I'll tell you guys what, like Gavin Sheets in that series against Seattle, and this is totally off topic. I don't know what happened to him, but he was 18 inches off making contact with some of the fastballs that were thrown his way. I don't know what happened to Gavin Sheets, but he just doesn't seem like he's even seeing the baseball now.
That's a fair assessment. It's been an ugly year. There was at one point in time earlier this year that people were talking about Gavin Sheets being an all-star, just in Chicago, mind you, and pseudo tongue-in-cheek as the team is terrible. But he put up some decent numbers early. We just knew that they were going to come back down.
I was a big believer in Gavin Sheets. I thought he was going to be worth a win and a half. F-WAR hasn't broken that way, but he was a guy that I was pointing to that would be a nice acquisition for some teams. But hey, that's baseball, man. And sometimes culture will absolutely kill you. I mean, you look at all the guys in Chicago that are playing below their career norms. Losing can be toxic. It can kill culture and it can kill production. I mean, look at all the guys that, Moncada and Tim Anderson and Abreu. And when this thing started to go downhill for Chicago, it was an epidemic with the whole team. So, winning does truly cure everything.
Yeah, those guys are completely broken now. It would appear anyway, with TA getting DFA'd and then Jose Abreu, same thing. It just seems like the franchise truly did suck out all of the joy from all of them. So, welcome to the White Sox.
The woman getting shot in center field by her own gun that was hidden in her belly fat, kind of that was a cherry on top.
We still don't have an answer on that as to what actually happened. They've kind of brushed it under the rug, so we don't even know.
That is such an insane story.
Mm-hmm.
That is such an insane story, the way that happened, that it almost is too good to be true for the way that the season went.
And because of it, a Vanilla Ice concert got canceled.
Dude, like
that night.
You can't write this in Hollywood.
Crazy.
What? Oh, man.
Yep, nuts.
Well, hey, the White Sox do have some nice pieces to get excited about for the future that are on the horizon. And now, unfortunately, as you guys have gone through this before, it's a waiting game for them to arrive.
That is exactly right. Do you have any other pressing questions, James? All right. Well, Joe, we appreciate your time so much. Thanks for hopping on with us. Great info, as always. Do you want to let the people know where they can find you and your work?
Yep. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Doyle MILB. You can find me at FutureStarSeries.com. And if you are a draftnik like me, you can find me at Patreon.com/overslot.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate you. We will talk soon. We will certainly, at least trade jabs on Twitter when the picks come out, and we appreciate your time. Thanks.
All right, boys. Anytime.
All right, thanks.